So one of the important things when setting up your Hacky is getting the seating arrangement right. So this is Let's Go, and it's under length, and that was deliberate. The wheelbase is roughly 1 metre. But you can see here that the seat has quite a rake on it, and when I'm sitting in it, the steering wheel is roughly where my knees are. So let's see if we can demonstrate that. Okay, excuse the hairy knees, but you can see how they're roughly where the steering wheel is. That does mean you're slightly knock-kneed when driving, but given the length that you can have a Hacky, then it's very difficult to actually get a full sort of prone position when driving anyway. So what you're looking for is getting something that's comfortable for 5 minutes of racing, and also is going to give you, a good balance in the machine as well. So you've got your center of gravity low, you've got the central point where the weight is, where you need it. So this is the new Hacky that's being built. You can see at the moment it's got the seating, but really hasn't got the steering wheel, anything else in there at the moment. What I need to do is basically pretend I'm driving it. So sit in that seat with the steering wheel, work out where that steering wheel is, make sure that's comfortable, then measure it. Usually what I try and do is, once I've got a few measurements, is use some tape and some rods and just try and roughly position it to where I want, make sure that feels right, and once that's all good, then I can get on and start making the steering column. What I've got to try and do now is get to a position where I'm comfortable. So that means my back is in a good space. I've got that sort of posture right, and the steering wheel is where I want it to be. I've got the angle right, and also the length. So with me, I've got a yardstick, so I can measure sort of the length. Tape measures are great, but the bend here makes it just a bit more harder to try and work that out. But I do have a measuring stick. Plus, you never go anywhere without a Sharpie, so I can mark off when I get to a point where I'm happy what it looks like. So I use these little steering wheels. They're quite small. I have played with the idea of more handlebar, because you actually only get a few degrees of turn on them, but for the moment I'll stick with it, get this position right, and if I change from a steering wheel to a bar or something in the future, all the lengths will still work for that. So we're getting close. I've found a piece of metal that's shorter, just makes it a little bit easier to set that point. And you can see I've got the sort of yardstick in there down, and it's balanced on the axle at the moment. The front, the feet are roughly where they would be if there's pedals, so that's important as well. The back's in a good position. So with a little bit more tweaking, I think we'll have the height of the steering wheel along with the angle. If I go down to the length of the post at the moment, then the steering wheel's resting on my knees, and I don't really want it resting, so it's got to come up a little bit. So I'm going to move the post, bring it up maybe 3 centimeters, and then check again, and if that's all good, then I've got the length of the post I need, at least from the center of the steering wheel down to the cross member on the chassis where it will be attaching to. So yeah, let's jiggle it about and just see how that works. So right, this looks about the final sort of length. I need the center point of the steering wheel down to the chassis. So it's off my knees as good as it can be. Play about with the feet a little bit more. Might have to just splay slightly, but my legs are almost straight, which is a little bit more than they were in Let's Go. And although you can't really see it, my arm has a slight bend in it. Don't want to be straight because then you're going to impact your manoeuvrability. I've got the length from the yardstick in terms of roughly what I need to make my column length to be. So I've got some of the key dimensions, so I can draw off those and probably write it on the chassis just so I don't forget the numbers and have to go through this palaver again. And the next step will be, we'll have a steering column that I can then, weld up. I'm just waiting for the tie rods to come from China. Once they've come, got the steering column in, then at that point it's at least a rolling chassis. And I can start thinking about the next step, which is routing things like electric cables, brake pipes and stuff like that. I have in mind where they're going, but I need to get that done. There's a few little bits left on the chassis to get welded on, but overall pretty happy with the progress so far. So the steering post is now ready to weld on. I've measured it lots of different ways, from the centre point down to the chassis rails, make sure that those are even, and also with our trusty set square, make sure it's plumb. It doesn't matter if sort of longitudinally it has a bit of variance, but laterally it would mean that the steering column would be a bit left or a bit right, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.